Thank you, Chairman. At the meeting of Cabinet on the 5th of October, minute 267 was determined, and that is the site allocation plan. The site allocation plan is a development plan document to accompany the adopted core strategy and made neighbourhood development plans in order that we can ensure the determination correctly of planning applications in the district. This version of the plan, which is proposed to go out to public consultation, replaces a previous and proposed submission document from July 2019. It looks at a number of specific proposals, including reserve housing sites, sites for self-build and custom-build housing, as well as identifying built-up area boundaries. There is a specific item under Rural 4, which undoubtedly will form some discussion further on. However, members, following discussion with Cabinet, the recommendation to Council is that the sustainability appraisal and strategic environmental assessment of the site allocations plan attached at Appendix 5 be received as forming part of the site allocations plan evidence base. Recommendation 2, that the preferred options version of the site allocations plan attached at Appendix 2 to the agenda report be endorsed for public consultation, and in so doing, the previous proposed submission, dated July 2019 version of the site allocations plan be formally withdrawn. Recommendation 3 is that the policy manager, in consultation with the deputy leader and portfolio holder for place, be authorised to make any further minor and editorial amendments to the site allocations plan prior to the preferred options consultation. And the final recommendation 4 is that section 7.13 of Appendix 2 be substituted with the text set out in the appendices to the update sheet, and this amended version of the site allocations plan, subject to recommendation 3, be recommended for public consultation under recommendation 2. Thank you.
Thank you. I now open the debate. The first councillor to speak is Councillor Pertigella.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I disagree with recommendation 4, and in particular its reference to the current section 713 of the preferred options of the site allocation plan, and would like to move an amendment to change it. And once this amendment is seconded, I would like to speak in support of my amendment. And I've sent the written amendment, so it should appear on your screens. Can I read my amendment?
Yes, yes, Councillor Pertigella.
Yeah, so I proposing changes to the recommendation 4 of item 10 of the agenda of this full council meeting in relation to the preferred option site allocation plan 2020. That section 713 Meon Vale, former engineer resource depot, Long Marston, proposal of Appendix 2 be changed as set out below, and that this amended version of the site allocation plan be recommended to Council for public consultation under recommendation 2. Changes to section 713, Rural 4, Meon Vale, former engineer resource depot Long Marston, to be changed from a specific site proposal for housing development to a safeguarded site, in view of its importance in terms of the district's green infrastructure and connectivity, social, mental and physical well-being and climate change mitigation strategy. Delete all references under Proposal Rural 4 to the allocation of the Woodland site, including all its associated open and wooded areas and Meon Vale for housing development. Add a new safeguarding policy to Proposal Rural 4, which states that the whole of the Woodland site, including all associated open and wooded areas, will be safeguarded and enhanced as a multifunctional, accessible green space. Add a new policy to Proposal Rural 4 for future management of the whole Woodland site, with reference to biodiversity, screening, accessibility, and green connectivity as an educational resource for the district, and the importance of the woods in mitigating the climate emergency. And further, Section 8 Part E of the Site Allocation Plan, the map of Rural 4, Meon Vale, former engineer resource depot, Marston, to reflect the change policy, showing the whole site, including all associated wooded areas and associated open areas, as safeguarded from built development. Thank you.
I'm reading, Councillor Pemberton has got a point of order.
Chairman, this amendment seeks to introduce a whole raft of new policy changes. I'd like to move for a brief adjournment to allow for the Planning Policy Officer, who I think it would be useful for the consideration of this item to be available to provide some technical advice. I am aware that he's available, but we do need to get him into the meeting to be able to give, I think it would be useful for members to have some Planning Policy Manager advice about significant changes and making up policy on the hoof. So I'm moving for a quick adjournment to get him on the line. If I can get a seconder for that, or if Chairman you can agree to that, that would be helpful.
Members, sorry for that, but when we're faced with these very technical amendments, it's only appropriate to get some officer input to it. And I'm going to invite Councillor Pertigella to speak to her amendment next, but I will advise members that we will then listen to John Careford as our professional advisor in these matters. So, Councillor Pertigella.
Thank you, Chair. So, this amendment would allow the Rural Proposed 4 to be included in the preferred option site allocation plan, not as allocated to housing development, but as a safeguarded and protected site because of its importance in terms of green infrastructure and connectivity, physical, social and mental well-being, and climate change mitigation to the district, in the same way the other sites in this plan are safeguarded for their importance, for example, to employment. Rural 4, as updated in the Cabinet version, is still very weak, as it only seeks to safeguard the mature trees and non-plantation woodland. There's no mention of the importance of the woodland to protect its species, or indeed no mention of biodiversity. I would even argue that the way this policy is currently worded would not give the Council much control in any future proposal put forward by the developer, except for the maximum number of houses. And I do agree with Councillor Pemberton's statement that the surest way to protect this amenity is to subject this site to the rigorous test of public consultation. My amendment will allow everyone to have their say, from residents to statutory consultees, not on whether this site should be developed, as was in the press release by the leader, but rather on whether this site should be protected. This site is clearly safeguarded anyway from build development in the core strategy itself. Core strategy policy AS11I proposes to retain and enhance the woodland plantations. This area is also, as we heard, a deferred local wildlife site, and it is subject to a S106 agreement signed in 2012, and I think it's my understanding that this agreement still stands in relation to the woodland. This agreement recognizes the importance of the greenfield area within the larger brownfield site. The woodland is the last wild green space left on the old Long Marston Engineer Depot. It cannot be reduced or fragmented without permanent damage to its biodiversity. And regarding previous planning consent, since then the Council has declared a climate emergency, and the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the fundamental human need or even right to have access to green spaces such as this. Further, the consent was for holiday lodges proposed in the part of the woodland which includes open grasslands. The lodges would not have been permanent dwellings, and therefore they would not have required the extensive road and associated infrastructure that 300 houses would require. Indeed, Phase 5, put forward by the landowner, includes an access road for substantial vehicle movement cutting through the greenway, interrupting this important green travel infrastructure for the district. Fellow Councillor, the climate emergency is accelerating, And each one of us has a duty to ensure that the actions we take today will support local, national, and global efforts to protect our planet for future generations. And yet, here we are today debating whether the clearing of several hectares of woodland, the fragmentation and loss of wildlife habitat and biodiversity from canopy to floor is justified to make space for houses. And let me tell you that we are acutely aware of the need of housing, and especially affordable housing. And indeed, my ward has welcomed its fair share with the Garden Village and of course Meon Vale itself. But the balance of housing and wild green spaces must be protected. Most of the brownfield areas have now been developed or are in the process of being developed, and the retainment of the woodland was an integral part of the original vision. As a council, we should not just build houses, we should build communities. The woodland is immensely precious to the Meon Vale community, to the surrounding villages and farther afield with visitors from Stratford along the Greenway. Not just because of its ecological value, but also because of its social value. So I ask you today, with this amendment, what kind of council we want to be. Let's protect and enhance green areas like these across our district. The Meon Vale Woods could provide a catalyst for the council to implement its own tree planting program and enhance its green network to support its strategic aims and to support the health and well-being of the people we serve. Consider the kind of community you want your children to inherit: clean, green, and sustainable, or poorly planned, degraded, and with fewer good quality places to enjoy. In our lifetimes, we get few opportunities to make such a positive difference, and this is a chance to leave a lasting legacy for our residents. Let's send a message of hope to the people of the district that this council will put nature and well-being at the heart of its decision and policies. And so I urge you to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pettigella. I would now ask John Careford if he would like to advise the council in a professional capacity. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. The specific points about inserting a new proposal, such as a sort of safeguarding proposal, green space designation into the SAP at this point, I'll just focus on that particular point, the technical aspects of that. It would require additional work to be done. We do need to apply any proposal on a consistent basis. There may be a number of sites elsewhere across the district that would warrant a similar level of protection. So I think in order to identify those sites, establish a methodology for the identification, assess them, whether they meet those criteria, I think you are looking at a further piece of work, a fairly significant piece of work, which would also have to revise the sustainability appraisal as well. I think that together would result in a delay to the site locations plan going up to consultation. We're looking to start that on the 29th of October, subject to going through council this afternoon. We would not be able to get it done, turned around by then. It could well delay it into the new year. It is the knock-on consequence of that delay that is a concern. Members, you'll be aware that the core strategy itself will become 5 years old next July. That in itself is not an issue, subject to it's an assessment whether it's still up to date. Now, the government have consulted on significantly increasing the housing numbers of the district. If the housing numbers were to increase, the core strategy, I think there would be question marks about whether it would be up to date. Having a site allocations plan that's progressed a long way down the line, it would enable us to transition into that new higher figure much easily than without it. In fact, we'd probably be back to planning by appeal if we don't have a pool of reserve sites we could call upon to use to increase our housing supply. So I think there are quite serious ramifications of delaying the site allocations plan when we come to it in next July. So hopefully that's helpful, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Junid, if you'd like to speak to the amendment.
This amendment refers to a very specific site and a specific location, not to the whole of the district, or which other areas will be able to put forward changes through the consultation, should they so wish. Now, the NPPF makes it clear that we should be protecting and enhancing biodiversity and the benefits available from natural capital and ecosystems, including woodland. Detrimental impacts on recreational opportunities have to be considered, as well as securing biodiversity net gain. If significant harm to biodiversity resulting from a development cannot be avoided or adequately mitigated, then planning shouldn't be given. I really don't think this should depend on whether trees are ancient or veteran, as all trees are valuable for climate change mitigation. To coincide with World Mental Health Day, the Royal Town Planning Institute published practical advice on mental health and town planning, giving advice on how UK planners can work within the current UK planning system to protect well-being and mental health. And this is clearly a reason why this should be protected. The upcoming planning reforms in the White Paper were referred to. Now, that not only risks marginalising the voice of communities and local government, they are extremely weak on reductions in CO2 and plans for climate adaptation. They signal more development and give maximum advantage to the development over the communities. And this is one reason why we want to be able to go forward with developing a SAP, but we don't see the reason for delaying it because of this amendment. The proposals in the SAP are weak on protection of green space. They don't provide sufficient rigour or precision, and the consultation is where this will be strengthened for other areas as well as the Meon Vale. During the consultation period, that is when we can strengthen all the green spaces, all the areas, and look at climate change mitigation and adaptation measures. During the core strategy review, I also hope that not only will we build in stronger biodiversity measures, but that we will also seek a local green spaces designation. I have not asked for that in this particular SAP consultation because of the delay that it would give, and I do not want a delay. I believe that this amendment does not delay the whole SAP. It does not require a great deal of extra work. It can be taken just as the independent, this one amendment for this one particular site, and I think that if there are other amendments, they also can be judged on those individual sites as well.
Thank you, Councillor Juned. Councillor Bromwich, you're next in my queue.
Yeah, certainly. Well, first of all, I always note the concern of any loss of biodiversity, especially in an area at the moment where we're getting our trees and biodiversity raped by HS2, and in the past where where the council's given planning consent into the area restraint in the Stowe Valley. However, when we put these sort of amendments through to remove 300 odd houses, that we have to find somewhere alternative to put them. Now, going back to when we adopted the core strategy in 2016, shortly after we'd had an election, myself and Councillor Crump were surprised to find 550 odd houses extra in Southall because we had a shortfall. If we take 300 out of our reserve sites at the moment and this site allocation plan, where do they go? We need to find somewhere and find somewhere fast. Otherwise, this core strategy could be compromised by next summer. The risk then is we go back to the developer free-for-all pre-core strategy. What seems to be the particular issue here is that we probably need to review overall our planning policy and work out how we are going to become more environmentally friendly on that planning policy. Whether we start insisting that we have woodland areas attached to new housing developments to try and increase our overall tree numbers. These are the discussions for the future. In regards to Meon Vale, I remember very well when we were discussing this core strategy, it was always probably assumed that the site was going to have extras on the site, on the reserve allocations. And when we looked for sites for reserve allocation, I remember being involved in discussions that I brought up the fundamental issue then of Wellesbourne Airfield, for example, which I was told was never going to be available before 2030. But if we take these 300 out, that suddenly puts that airfield back into a possible discussion. Does it put in then Model Village on the CEMEX site when they were promoting 2,500? Bear in mind that government is threatening to put an additional 3,000 houses into our district. So what we have in reserve at the moment, we may still be taking a lot more. We've going to have to make some harsh decisions, but we can make responsible decisions and we can look at minimising impact. But the bottom line is, unless we propose an extra 300 houses from somewhere, we cannot accept this amendment. And if the proposer would like to suggest where these 300 extra go, then tell me where you're going to put these houses. Because this site allocation plan, we need to have going effective and going fast, otherwise we compromise our core strategy. Now I see I'm reading a comment here in the chat turning around and saying it's not a reserve site. Well, we haven't adopted any reserve sites yet. We have ideas and this is what's come forward. We now need to make decisions of this. The question is, if not Meon Vale, where else? And I think that needs to be put on the table in this amendment. We can have an amendment trying to secure the environment. I'm sure we in South would love the Stowe Valley to be secured, that from development. Indeed, I've only turned around and actually been fighting this for a number of potential developments for a number of years. But we have to be firm now in this and say, we have a proposal. If we are going to remove a section of that proposal, we must be able to suggest the alternative. Otherwise, it has to stay there.
Thank you, Councillor Bromwich. Councillor Wojciech, you're next in my queue.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I went to the woods yesterday and had a walk round for about an hour, and actually once you're actually into the area, into the site itself, you kind of then realise actually this is a whole lot bigger than talking about houses, developers, what goes where. It becomes much more emotional than that, much more emotional, and I think COVID-19 has changed everything. It's a game changer, and when you have these beautiful walks around a wooded area, and it gives so much joy to so many people that now live there. I mean, those woods a few years ago were an isolated piece of nature with very few people benefiting from how wonderful they were. But now we're building all the way around them, which means the community is changing, the area is changing, and people are benefiting from that beautiful woodland. So if it means we have to, as a council, work a little bit harder to perhaps have some delays to the plan and work differently, then the council must be more nimble in the changing circumstances. And we have got changing circumstances, and local residents feel that they're open spaces. I go walking up in Welcome Hills in the Clopton area almost on a daily basis, and it's changed, and we need to change as a council. And so the decision we make today is a political choice, not a technical choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wojciech. So Councillor Curtis, please.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks to John Careford for giving that clarification earlier. But I think that, to me, the fact that other sites haven't been identified as requiring protection doesn't constitute a good reason for not protecting this 35 acres of very important woodland and natural habitat. I think, to me, it rather demonstrates a failing in the site allocations plan process. And I was surprised, I admit, when I discovered that Woodland doesn't appear to be taken into account when developing the site allocation plan. And that's really what I want to say, but just also to reply to speak to Councillor Bromwich, I think if we have a choice of an abandoned airfield or 35 acres of woodland on which to build houses, I know certainly where my preference would lie. And picking up Councillor Fodgick's points as well, COVID-19 and climate change are, or they actually should be, game changers. The council has said several times that climate change will involve us making difficult decisions, but thus far we don't really seem to be addressing those difficult decisions. And I think to willfully destroy this woodland flies absolutely in the face of the climate change emergency. And I would find it very difficult to see how, as councillors, we can look our residents in the face and say we sincerely recognise the challenges of both COVID-19 and climate change while we still destroy woodland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Councillor Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened carefully, and I was, as you might recall, Chairman, when we passed the climate change motion some 12 or more months ago. And everybody was unanimous in supporting the issue about climate change and how we minimise its impact in this district. So the council is quite clear on that. Where I have a concern is with this amendment is not that we are reversing that earlier decision, but firstly, we are ignoring the advice we've just heard from our senior policy officer, who is highly experienced in these matters. And if his opinion is that by accepting this amendment, we have to bring into account a number of different issues which might have the same, or a number of different areas in the district might have the same, fall in the same category, we cannot ignore Mr. Careford's advice. He is our senior officer in planning policy. So members, be wary of ignoring Mr. Careford. Secondly, this is not a planning application. We are miles from planning applications. This is a consultation document. And I have read a number, I haven't read them all, there have been a very significant number of emails we've all had. But people talk about lack of consultation, people talk about council overruling local feeling, all of which I can completely understand if they were accurate. But this is a proposal to go out for consultation. We will, post-consultation, have a revised document. That document will again go out to consultation. There will be so many opportunities to consider, but until we have that consultation and have the feedback from the consultees, then it is inappropriate, I believe, to turn around at this stage and say this site and this site only must be excluded. We've been informed by Councillor Pemberton in the copy of some of the letters he sent to some of those writing in, that this will better protect the woods than the current position where they are now in, where this is a site within the core strategy. And that is what we're all trying to achieve, better protection. But there are two mechanisms. One, we throw this site out, and as Mr. Careford has clearly explained, that is going to have a major impact on our delivery of this document. And the issues that Councillor Bromwich has brought up as well, which we've heard, I'm not going to repeat them. So, ladies and gentlemen, members, councillors, just remember this is approving a document for consultation. It is not a planning application which will condemn this woodland to destruction. Let us see what everybody says. Let us pull those responses in. And when we have those responses, then let us make a decision across the whole district and in relation to Rural 4, whether this is, after that consultation, the right way to go forward. And if the decision is it isn't, then we'll have to change it. If, however, all the technical advice and the popular feeling is it is the right place, then so be it. But please, let us take this as what it is, a consultation and nothing more at this stage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kessel. Councillor Cargill, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do support the public consultation of the reserve sites for a number of reasons, including getting the best outcome for the sites contained for the residents, but also as an engagement exercise with the residents. As the State District report shows, only 34% of residents felt they could influence decisions in their local area. This is a golden opportunity. As a very popular part of the country, there's demand for homes here. In the report, again, affordable housing is at the top of residents' priorities. We've known for some time that the average house price in Stratford district is above the national average, significantly. We now see that the district's lower quartile house prices, apart from flats and maisonettes, are 1/3 higher, or actual costs about £80,000. Needless to say, this translates into higher rents, and given the ratio of house prices to earnings of over 11:1, we can see the imperative to do more in the affordable housing market and sector. To reflect for a moment, if I may, on the residents and the Meon Vale and the residents, they've put forward a very good campaign to retain the trees in their local woods, and why not? It's a beautiful area. But many of my communities and other communities feel exactly the same. I'm fully supportive of retaining woodland open spaces, and I have campaigned on that. I'm a country lad at heart, and I want to retain as much as I can of this beautiful countryside. However, as residents of Meon Vale, they have homes. I have members of my community that cannot afford a home either for themselves or their children, allowing them to remain in the community they were born into. To them, a home and a roof over their heads is more important than some trees. Until an alternative funding model comes along, it's obvious if we want more affordable housing, we have to build market homes to pay for them. Houses have to go somewhere, and much as we would like it, we need to be very aware we cannot protect all open spaces, including woodland, forever. The point raised in one of the Meon Vale residents' emails, I think I got it today in actual fact, mentions building out longer Marston's of brownfield site. Yes, please. But we've been stopped by not having the relief road, and there's opposition to that. How come we win? We can't on this one. Finally, we've been advised that this amendment of the green to protect the green open spaces. I can't accept that, given the advice and such like that we've heard today. Public spaces, green open spaces is a passion of mine, but this is a myopic look at just one area in the district. I have spaces I want to protect, and no doubt others do too. If we're going to look at this, then let's look at it in detail for the whole district and not just one part of it. To accept this amendment will delay the core strategy, and then we enter planning by appeal. Be careful what you wish for. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cargill. Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Having heard Mr. Careford's input, I think we should reject this amendment. I think the fact is that the SAP is going to consultation the points that can be made on consultation can actually be picked up in the final version. So I see absolutely no reason to go ahead with this amendment. And I think when we put the SAP out for consultation, then we should get the feedback that enables us to deal with residents' concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Jefferson. Councillor Jenny Fradgley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's a bit slow getting up. I'm well aware of the horns of the dilemma the district finds itself in between providing sufficient housing, which we've already spoken about earlier in this debate, sufficient housing that people can afford. I believe the government white paper coming forward actually mitigates against us being able to provide the affordable houses that we will need by imposing the numbers of houses that I understand it might be doing. However, sites in this area are already safeguarded. This amendment attempts to highlight safeguarding on a particular wood in a particular application, which is about to go for a particular recommendation, which is about to go forward. And I think we do need to think so carefully about our precious places. I was part of this as part of this council when I think we rushed through in the last call strategy a particular line on a map which went through for consultation, and actually the Southwest Relief Road now seems to be really down the track, and we didn't think that through sufficiently well at that time. I do not want to see the same thing happening with our precious woodlands not being thought through carefully enough, and we've already heard pleas for these woods to be cut down and built on. We need to make sure that our safeguarding measures are robust and enforceable going forward. And I hope that we actually approve this amendment in order to strengthen the thinking of our officers to protect precious places in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fradgley. Two more speakers on this amendment, which we might just manage to get in by 5 o'clock. Councillor Cleeve.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, may I say, with global warming, our first priority should always be to conserve existing woodlands, whether they are old growth or young regrowing forests. A mature tree can absorb carbon dioxide at a rate of 48 pounds per year. Cutting down these trees alone will release more CO2 than any new trees can absorb. As Councillor Pemberton said, when we declared a climate emergency, we need to make the difficult decisions, and this is one of them. Do we really want to add more CO2 to our environment? This amendment is not about removing a site, but reassigning it as a safeguarded site. So I have a question to John Kerford, if I may. Can he confirm whether or not these 300 homes are critical to our site allocation plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleeve. Councillor Riley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am not taken in by people saying that this is just a proposal or just for consideration. As far as I'm concerned, it's the thin end of the wedge. We're starting down the road, and it's something that we should not be considering. We should be preserving woodland. There are other sites in the district which don't have woodland on them, which could be considered for housing ahead of this. As a Green councillor, I can't countenance cutting down 35 acres of woodland to put houses on, and if it delays the document we've talked about, well, so be it. But I'm not going to sacrifice 35 acres of woodland for a document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I was going to leave questions until the end, but as people are now introducing these into the chat, I'll ask John Kerford if he'd like to address Councillor Cleeve's one question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to confirm, so the Rural 4 is not proposed as a reserve site. It is a standalone specific site allocation, which is not critical to the site allocations plan in that sense. I would just draw, if I may, members' attention to the wording of the amendment that went through Cabinet, which is looking for up to 300 homes and to preserve or retain as much woodland as possible. So it's in that context that we're looking to consult. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, John. I'm now going to call on Councillor Pemberton in respect of the amendment, and then Councillor Pertigella, and then we will put the amendment to the vote. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think what we need to do is, first of all, to understand this is not a planning committee. We are not today making a decision on whether this site is to be developed or not. We also need to really focus in on the outcome, and the outcome that the ward member and has been expressed by other members of this council is to find a way to protecting this site. So you have to ask yourself the question, what's the best way to do that? And where we are going with this is to consider changing the nature of the site to call it a safeguarded site, to add a safeguarding policy and a proposal for management of the site, none of which have any evidence base to support them, none of which demonstrate in any way, shape or form that this site is so exceptional across the district that it alone has to be considered in this way as against any other woodland or open space. And in that point, John Kerford is absolutely right. We would have to go back and look at the entire district. Now, the site of itself, 300 houses, John Kerford's absolutely right, doesn't hit the core strategy in that sense, but the delay to the SAP does. And Councillor Riley is prepared to pay the price of an additional 800 houses per year for the next 20 years if we work on the government's numbers, and that will create huge difficulties. We also seem to think that we're acting in isolation. Number one, the landowner and developer can bring forward an application at any time they wish. They would undoubtedly look to the decision, if this amendment were to go through, and challenge us on the absence of an evidence base. At the same time, if we do not allow this site to go to public consultation, we deny the public the opportunity to have the widest possible response and consultation. And I can see David Curtis laughing at me. Absolutely, Councillor Curtis. If you want to look your residents and everybody else's residents in the eye and say you stop this, that's great. Then look them in the eye in 12 months' time and say why you didn't stop a planning application on this site, because the issues that will be brought forward will be narrow. You won't be able to bring these issues forward that you've raised today. You won't be able to demonstrate there's an evidence base to support what you've done. Okay, you can only get anywhere near that through the public consultation, which is focused and broad and creates an evidence base that ensures that if there is a decision to take this out, it's done in a way that can be supported and gives absolutely everybody the best possible chance to ensure that that decision is robustly supported by a planning inspector. If you want to take your chances at a planning application, I think you really just need to consider and be careful what you wish for. Public consultation is important to this council, okay? And our officers listen to public consultation. I listen to public consultation. What I need is the evidence. And what you're doing is tying everybody's hands behind their back. You're tying residents' hands behind their back in an ability to challenge whether this site should be developed at all. Members, there is no way that we are going to be able to stand up these changes and not be open to challenge. What you will end up doing is leaving this to the vagaries of a planning application. And ultimately, I am absolutely clear that the best way for Councillor Pertigella, Councillor Curtis, Councillor Bromwich and every other councillor in this virtual room who has concerns about the site, the best way to achieve the outcome is to reject this amendment, vote to get the thing into the public consultation, and Councillor Curtis and Councillor Pertigella, you can make your case, and the residents, the friends of Meon Vale would have an opportunity to actually bring an evidence base to support their arguments. Because to be blunt, just listening on, we won't be able to raise the social media argument in a planning application. So climate change is tough, and making a tough decision means making the decision that gets the thing into the public consultation. The easy decision is to say no, but the outcome, I absolutely fear the outcome will be that in 12 or 18 months' time, we'll all be sat round this room thinking, well, how did it get planning permission then? So members, just think long and hard about what you're trying to achieve. I cannot support the amendment. I absolutely firmly support our officers that getting this into public consultation is absolutely the best way to ensure that this site is safeguarded. And I will probably just end there.
Thank you, Councillor Pemberton. And now finally, Councillor Pertigella, and then we'll put the amendment to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, where do I start? So first of all, it's not our intention to remove it from the site allocation plan. It's our intention to actually have it as a safeguarded site in the same way that, for example, other sites have been safeguarded because they were important for infrastructure or for employment. So we are asking the question to the public. Everyone will have their say, but our question will be whether this site should be safeguarded. The landowner are likely to object to a safeguarding policy, but let them demonstrate at a public examination that the destruction of this natural asset satisfies the requirements of national and local planning policy. And regarding the 300 houses where we are going to have to put them, where just in the last week, I had application for 28 houses which were not part of the core strategy in my ward. We are expecting 66 more houses as well, and that's already nearly 100 houses. So these houses are being put forward anyway. And Councillor Mark Cargill comment about the Southwestern Relief Road. Surely, if any spare road capacity should be allocated to the Garden Village, what happens to these up to 300 houses on this area? How we're going to cope with that? Where is the spare capacity going? So maybe that's something that Mr. Kerford can also explain. So the fact that we are actually asking, or that this administration is asking whether woodlands should be destroyed, really shows that they are not committed to the climate emergency and to the climate catastrophe that is encompassing this planet. Woodlands play a fundamental role. They improve, they improve water quality, they reduce noise, they improve air quality, so they lock in carbon. They are important for the mental and physical and social well-being of communities. So I urge you to vote for this amendment to safeguard the site in the site allocation plan, so that we can have our public consultation. And I would like the vote to be recorded, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pertigella. So that concludes the debate on the amendment. I shall now ask David Buckland to conduct a roll, and you're voting either for the amendment, against the amendment, or abstaining. Over to you, David.
If you could please repeat when I call your name, whether you're for, against, or abstaining for the motion which has been the amendment that has been put. Chairman of the Council, Councillor Dixon.
Councillor Dixon, against.
Thank you. Councillor Fitter.
Councillor Fitter, abstain.
Councillor Adam.
Councillor Adam, for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Alcock.
Councillor Alcock, for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Councillor Barker against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Bromwich.
Councillor Bromwich against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Cargill.
Councillor Cargill against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Cleeve.
Councillor Cleeve for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Crump.
Councillor Crump against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Councillor Curtis for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Eden.
Councillor Eden for.
Thank you. Councillor Fielding.
Councillor Fielding against.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Councillor Fleming against.
Thank you. Councillor Foytick.
Councillor Foytick for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Foreman.
Councillor Foreman against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Fradgley.
Councillor Ian Fradgley for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Fradgley.
Councillor Jenny Fradgley for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Harris. Can you hear me now, Jackie? I'll come back to Councillor Harris in just 1 minute, Chairman. Councillor Trevor Harvey.
Councillor Harvey against.
Councillor Peter Henshaw-Serafin.
Councillor Henshaw-Serafin for the amendment.
Councillor Jefferson.
Councillor Jefferson against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Councillor Jennings against.
Thank you. Councillor Juned.
Councillor Juned for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Kendall is absent. Councillor Kettle.
Councillor Kettle against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Councillor Mills against.
Thank you. Councillor O'Donnell.
Councillor O'Donnell against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Councillor Parry against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Councillor Pemberton against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Pertagella.
Councillor Pertagella for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
Councillor Richards against.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Councillor Riley for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Rock.
Councillor Rock for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Rolfe.
Councillor Rolfe for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Shenton.
Councillor Shenton against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Wally Hoggins.
Councillor Wally Hoggins against the amendment.
Yeah, after all the hoo-ha I went through with GLH, I don't see this site as any different. We should follow the process and I'm against.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Thank you. So, Chairman, there were 14 votes in favour of the amendment, 20 against with 1 abstention, and therefore the